In a small rural town, the old Padre Anchieta Municipal School holds dark secrets behind its worn walls. When a group of students is invited to an extra night class, they have no idea that they are about to face terror in its purest form. As the night progresses, the empty hallways echo with sinister whispers and dancing shadows, revealing that not all the students in this school are alive. The mysterious invitation arrived like a digital whisper in the middle of the night. 5 cell phones vibrated simultaneously, their screens illuminating sleepy and confused faces. Lucas, the skeptic of the group, was the first to react. His fingers slid across the screen, rereading the enigmatic message. "Extra class at 11 p.m? This must be a prank," he muttered, but something in his stomach tightened. In the room next door, his twin sister Bea sat up in bed, her long black hair falling over her pale face. She had always been sensitive, and now felt a cold chill down her spine. "Lou," she called softly, "did you get it too?" Across town in a small apartment, Mariana was awake studying for a test. The sudden glow of her cell phone startled her. When she read the message, a curious smile formed on her lips. She had always been the adventurous one, never backing down from a challenge. In the suburbs, Roberto, the athlete of the group, paused his nightly training. Sweat trickled down his face as he stared at the screen, hesitant. A class so late? It seemed strange, but he didn't want to be the only one to miss out. Finally, in the house on the outskirts of town, almost at the edge of the forest, Carla woke with a start. Her always attentive green eyes scanned the dark room before focusing on her phone. As she read the message, a shiver ran down her spine. Carla had always had a sixth sense for danger, and now all her instincts were screaming in alert. The 5 friends, connected by a friendship forged in the hallways of Padre Anchieta School, now found themselves united by something more sinister. Messages were exchanged quickly. "Are you going?" Lucas. "Not sure. It seems weird." Bea. "Come on. It could be interesting." Mariana. "If everyone goes, I'll go." Roberto. "I have a bad feeling about this." Carla. As they debated, none of them noticed the shadows moving outside their windows or the faint smell of sulfur in the air. The decision they made that night would change their lives forever, if they survived to tell the story. As the clock approached midnight, 5 solitary figures converged on the imposing and somber silhouette of Padre Anchieta School, each step bringing them closer to a fate they couldn't imagine in their worst nightmares. The full moon hung in the sky like a vigilant eye, bathing the decrepit facade of Padre Anchieta School in a spectral light. The 5 students gathered before the imposing iron gates, their breaths forming small clouds in the chilly night air. Mariana, always leading, reached out to the rusty gate. The moment her fingers touched the cold metal, a sharp creak pierced the silence, and the gate slowly opened on its own. The friends exchanged nervous glances. "This isn't normal," Bea whispered, clutching her brother's arm. Lucas, trying to keep his composure, replied, "It must be just the wind." Roberto stepped forward, his athletic courage wavering. "Guys, maybe we should—" But before he could finish, a cold wind blew through the courtyard, carrying the distant sound of children's laughter. Carla, her eyes wide, pointed to one of the second-floor windows. "Did you see that?" For a brief moment, they all swore they saw a shadow move behind the foggy glass. Reluctantly, but driven by morbid curiosity, they crossed the courtyard, dry leaves crunched under their feet, and with each step, the feeling of being watched grew. When they reached the main entrance, the heavy oak door opened with a dragging groan, as if inviting them in. The lobby was plunged in shadow, lit only by a flickering light coming from the corridor to the right. "Room 13, second floor," Mariana reminded them, her voice slightly trembling. As they climbed the stairs, the steps seemed to groan and twist under their feet. The walls, once adorned with student work and announcements, were now bare except for dark marks resembling dragged hands. In the second-floor corridor, the fluorescent lights flickered erratically, creating a disturbing strobe effect. With each flash, the students glimpsed something different: a chair out of place, a shadow moving quickly, a distorted reflection in the glass doors of the classrooms. "There it is," Lucas pointed, his voice almost inaudible. The door to room 13 stood out from the others. While the others were faded grey, this one was a deep black, with the number 13 etched in bright red, as if written with fresh blood. As they approached, the air grew suddenly dense and cold. An acrid smell of sulphur and decomposition filled their nostrils, making them gag. Carla, driven by an inexplicable impulse, reached for the doorknob. The moment her fingers touched the cold metal, a sharp, supernatural scream echoed through the corridors, making them recoil in panic. The door opened slowly, revealing impenetrable darkness inside. From within, an ethereal and icy voice whispered, "Come in, my dear students. The class is about to begin." Paralyzed with fear but unable to flee, the 5 friends found themselves inexorably drawn into the room, the door closing behind them with a final thud. The real nightmare was just beginning. Darkness engulfed the 5 friends as the door closed behind them. The silence was so dense they could hear their own accelerated heartbeats. Suddenly, a faint greenish light began to emanate from the walls, gradually revealing the interior of room 13. What they saw made their stomachs turn. The desks, arranged in a perfect circle, were covered with a thin layer of dust and cobwebs. Each one had a name carved into the wooden top, names none of them recognized. Bea stifled a scream upon noticing dark stains on the floor, forming a pattern that vaguely resembled arcane symbols. "Is that blood?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The walls, once white, now displayed writings in twisted calligraphy, phrases repeated obsessively. "Don't look back. They are always watching. The last lesson is eternal." Roberto, trying to stay calm, pointed to the blackboard. "Look at this." On the cracked and yellowed surface, a message awaited them. "Welcome to the final class. Today we will learn about primal fear." A cold wind blew through the room, making candles in rusty candlesticks light themselves. The flames danced, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Mariana, always the bravest, took a step forward. "Who's there? What kind of joke is this?" In response, a low, guttural laugh echoed from the corners of the room. The temperature dropped drastically, and the students' breaths condensed in the air in small vapor clouds. Lucas, clutching his sister's hand, stammered, "This isn't real, it can't be." Then the figure appeared. Initially it seemed just a denser shadow in the front of the room. Gradually it took shape, a tall, thin man wearing an old-fashioned black suit. His face, partially hidden by a wide-brimmed hat, was a mask of shadows except for the eyes, 2 burning embers that seemed to pierce the soul of each of the students. "Welcome, my dear students." The voice was like chalk scraping on a board, making them shudder. "I am so pleased you accepted my invitation." Carla, her 6th sense screaming in alert, tried to retreat towards the door, only to find it had disappeared, leaving only a smooth wall in its place. The teacher smiled, revealing pointed, yellowed teeth. "Oh, don't worry about the exit. You won't be needing it, not for a long time." With a fluid gesture, he pointed to the desks. "Please take your seats. The class is about to begin. And we have so much to learn about yourselves, about this school, and about the horrors that dwell in the shadows between worlds." Against their wills, the five felt their bodies move towards the desks, like puppets pulled by invisible strings. As they sat, the stains on the floor began to glow with a sickly purple light. The teacher approached the center of the circle, his smile widening unnaturally. Now, who would like to share their greatest fear first? The lights flickered, and for an instant, the students saw the true face of their captor, a vision so horrifying that their screams were caught in their throats. The night of terror at the cursed school had only just begun. The teacher glided through the circle of desks, his steps making no sound, his burning eyes fixed on Mariana. "You, my dear, why don't you start by telling us about that night in your grandmother's basement?" Mariana paled. How do you know about that?" Her voice trembled. A cruel smile formed on the entity's lips. "I know everything, every dark secret, every repressed fear. This school has been a receptacle of terrors for generations." Suddenly, the walls of the room began to ooze a viscous dark liquid. The smell of rust and decomposition filled the air. "You see," the entity continued, its voice now reverberating supernaturally, "this school was built on the ruins of an old sanatorium. The walls that surround you have witnessed centuries of suffering and madness. Images began to form in the dark substance covering the walls. Scenes of cruel experiments, patients screaming in agony, doctors with demented smiles." Lucas tried to stand up, but found himself bound to the chair by ghostly chains. The chains hissed words in an ancient language, each syllable burning his skin like acid. Bia, her eyes now completely white, began to levitate. Her mouth opened in a silent scream as children's voices echoed through the ventilation ducts. "Come play with us, Bia, forever and ever." Roberto, the athlete, felt his muscles contract painfully. His body began to contort and deform, bones cracking and skin stretching. In a mirror that appeared before him, he saw his reflection transform into a grotesque, monstrous creature. Carla, paralyzed by terror, watched the shadows in the corners of the room come to life. Distorted figures, half human, half something else, crawled towards them with elongated fingers and sharp claws. The smell of decomposition became unbearable. The teacher floated to the center of the room, his laugh reverberating supernaturally. "Excellent, excellent. Feel the fear coursing through your veins, feeding the hungry entities that inhabit this school." Objects began to fly around the room. Books, pens, pieces of chalk, spinning in a chaotic whirlwind. The pages of the books opened, revealing grotesque images that seemed to move and change every instant. Suddenly, the clock on the wall began to spin frantically, counterclockwise. With each turn, the students glimpsed scenes from the dark past of the school. Obscure rituals, cruel experiments, missing students. "See the true face of this institution," the entity proclaimed. "Every brick was laid with suffering. Every room is a monument to horror." The walls began to bleed, the dark liquid flowing and forming pools on the floor. From the pools, cadaverous hands emerged, grabbing the ankles of the terrified students. Bia, still suspended in the air, began to speak with a voice that was not her own. "They are coming. The forgotten, the sacrificed. They want revenge." The ground shook violently, cracks forming and revealing a pulsating abyss of darkness below. Distant screams echoed from the depths, as if thousands of tortured souls were crying for release. Mariana, almost completely swallowed by her monstrous desk, managed to scream, "Why us? What did we do to deserve this?" The entity's smile widened impossibly. "You did nothing, my dears. You were simply unlucky enough to be chosen, like so many before you." The lights flickered violently, and for an instant, The five saw their own pale, lifeless bodies sitting in the desks. "Don't worry," the teacher whispered, his form now a mass of shadows and tentacles. "The night is long, and we have so much to explore. Your fears, your guilt, your darkest sins. Everything will be exposed and savored." A collective scream of horror echoed through the room, but it was muffled by the walls. Outside, the moon shone indifferently on the silent facade of Padre Anchieta School, while inside 5 souls faced a night of unimaginable terror, trapped in a lesson from which they might never escape. The classroom transformed into a cauldron of supernatural horrors. The dense, suffocating air seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The teacher, now an amorphous entity of shadows and burning eyes, watched with morbid delight as his students faced their worst nightmares. Mariana was the first to scream. Her desk began to melt, turning into a viscous mass that climbed up her legs. "Help! It's pulling me down!" She struggled desperately, but the more she fought, the faster she sank. Lucas tried to get up to help her, but ghostly chains emerged from nowhere, binding him to the chair. The chains hissed words in an ancient language, each syllable burning his skin like acid. Bia, her eyes now completely white, began to levitate. Her mouth opened in a silent scream as children's voices echoed through the ventilation ducts. "Come play with us, Bia, forever and ever." Roberto, the athlete, felt his muscles contract painfully. His body began to contort and deform, bones cracking and skin stretching. In a mirror that appeared before him, he saw his reflection transform into a grotesque, monstrous creature. Carla, paralyzed by terror, watched the shadows in the corners of the room come to life. Distorted figures, half human, half something else, crawled towards them with elongated fingers and sharp claws. The smell of decomposition became unbearable. The teacher floated to the center of the room, his laugh reverberating supernaturally. "Excellent, excellent." Feel the fear coursing through your veins, feeding the hungry entities that inhabit this school. Objects began to fly around the room, books, pens, pieces of chalk, spinning in a chaotic whirlwind. The pages of the books opened, revealing grotesque images that seemed to move and change every instant. Suddenly, the clock on the wall began to spin, frantically counterclockwise. With each turn, the students glimpsed scenes from the dark past of the school, obscure rituals, cruel experiments, missing students. "See the true face of this institution," the entity proclaimed. Every brick was laid with suffering. Every room is a monument to horror. The walls began to bleed, the dark liquid flowing and forming pools on the floor. From the pools, cadaverous hands emerged, grabbing the ankles of the terrified students. Bia, still suspended in the air, began to speak with a voice that was not her own. "They are coming. The forgotten, the sacrificed, they want revenge." The ground shook violently, cracks forming and revealing a pulsating abyss of darkness below. Distant screams echoed from the depths as if thousands of tortured souls were crying for release. Mariana, almost completely swallowed by her monstrous desk, managed to scream, "Why us? What did we do to deserve this?" The entity's smile widened impossibly. "You did nothing, my dears. You were simply unlucky enough to be chosen, like so many before you." The lights flickered violently, and for an instant the 5 saw their own pale, lifeless bodies sitting in the desks. "Don't worry," the teacher whispered, his form now a mass of shadows and tentacles. "The night is long, and we have so much to explore. Your fears, your guilt, your darkest sins, everything will be exposed and savored." A collective scream of horror echoed through the room, but it was muffled by the walls. Outside, the moon shone indifferently on the silent facade of Padre Anchieta School, while inside 5 souls faced a night of unimaginable terror, trapped in a lesson from which they might never escape. The air in the classroom suddenly turned icy, with crystals of frost forming on the surfaces. The teacher, now a pulsating mass of shadows, raised what appeared to be an arm, pointing to the center of the circle formed by the desks. "It's time for the most important lesson." His voice reverberated, making the walls tremble. "The truth behind this school's curse." The floor in the center of the circle began to bubble as if it were liquid. A thick, dark mist emerged, forming 3-dimensional images before the horrified eyes of the students. "May 5th, 1974, the entity narrated. "The day everything changed, the images came to life. The 5 saw the school as it was 50 years ago. Hallways filled with smiling students, teachers walking with piles of books. An atmosphere of normality that would soon prove illusory." Mariana, still struggling against the desk engulfing her, gasped, What happened that day?" The scene shifted. It now showed the school's basement, a place none of them knew existed. There, a group of teachers and the principal were gathered around a strange stone altar. They believed they had found a way to ensure the school's eternal success. The entity continued. "An ancient ritual, a sacrifice for entities beyond human comprehension." Horror spread across the faces of the 5 friends as they saw 5 students being led to the basement, unconscious. Lucas, his voice trembling, asked, "Those are the names on our desks?" "Very perceptive," the entity laughed. "Yes, those were the chosen ones, just as you were chosen today." The ritual scene was grotesque and bloody. The students' screams echoed through the mist, causing Bia, Roberto, Carla, Lucas, and Mariana to writhe in agony, as if feeling the victim's pain. But something went terribly wrong. The entity's voice was almost jubilant. The ritual not only failed, but opened a portal to something much older and hungrier than those fools could have imagined. The images showed the school being swallowed by shadows, screams echoing through every hallway. Students and teachers ran in panic as monstrous forms pursued them. The entire school became a slaughterhouse, the narrative continued. Hundreds died that night. The few survivors went mad with what they saw. Carla, tears of terror streaming down her face, murmured, "But how does no one know about this? How is the school still running?" The entity's laugh chilled their blood. "Oh, but they do know. Deep in their minds, everyone who enters here feels it. The nightmares, the shadows in the corner of their eyes, the inexplicable fear. The school feeds on that." The images changed again, showing decades of inexplicable incidents, mysterious disappearances, grotesque accidents. And every 50 years, the entity concluded, 5 new chosen ones are brought to renew the pact, to feed the insatiable hunger that inhabits these walls. The mist dissipated, leaving the 5 face to face with the terrible reality. They were not the first, and if the cycle continued, they would not be the last. Now, the entity's voice was laden with an ancient and terrible hunger. "How about we explore your own fears and sins? The night is long, and there is much to savor." The shadows in the corners of the room came to life, slowly advancing toward the paralyzed students. The truth behind Padre Anchieta School had been revealed, but the horror was far from over. The long night of psychological and supernatural torture had only just begun for the 5 friends, trapped in a nightmare from which they might never wake up. A deafening crash shook the room, and the desks that held the 5 friends shattered. For a brief moment they found themselves free, exchanging looks of panic and relief. "Run!" Mariana shouted, being the first to dash toward the door that had mysteriously reappeared. The teacher, now an amorphous mass of tentacles and eyes, roared with supernatural fury. "The hunt begins. Run, little lambs. Make this interesting." The five bolted into the hallway, their frantic breaths echoing off the walls. The school had transformed into a labyrinth of nightmares, the hallways stretching impossibly, changing direction when least expected. Lucas, running beside Bia, panted, "We need to find the exit." But every door they opened revealed scenes of indescribable horror. Classrooms full of spectral students, their empty eyes fixed on blackboards that bled. Laboratories where grotesque experiments came to life, masses of flesh and metal writhing in agony. Roberto, the athlete, led the group. "This way," he shouted, turning a corner. But his shout turned to terror when the floor beneath his feet disappeared, revealing a bottomless pit. Reflexively, he grabbed the edge, his fingers slowly slipping. Carla and Mariana pulled him back, just seconds before dark tentacles emerged from the abyss, whipping the air where Roberto had been. "This is madness," Bia sobbed, her face pale with terror. "There's no way out." The walls began to pulse as if alive. Distorted faces of pain emerged from the surface, mouths opening in silent screams. The air grew increasingly dense, laden with the smell of decomposition and despair. Suddenly, a child's laughter echoed down the hallway. A small figure in a white dress stained with red appeared at the end of the corridor. "Want to play?" Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were pits of darkness. "Don't look at her!" Carla screamed, her sixth sense screaming in alert. "It's a trap." They turned to run in the opposite direction, only to find a solid wall where there had once been a path. They were cornered. The sound of slow, dragging footsteps came from all directions. Shadows moved at the periphery of their vision, half-human, half-monstrous forms slowly approaching. "We need to split up," Lucas said, his voice trembling. "Maybe then we'll have a chance." "No!" Mariana yelled. "That's what they want. Together we're stronger." But the decision was taken out of their hands. The floor beneath their feet began to spin like an infernal carousel. Screams of panic echoed as they were thrown in different directions, each landing in a dark, solitary hallway. Mariana found herself in a hallway that seemed endless, mirrors covering both sides. Each reflection showed a distorted and terrifying version of herself. Lucas fell into a room that looked like the library, but the books on the shelves pulsed as if alive, pages opening to reveal mouths full of sharp teeth. Bia landed in a dark gymnasium where sports equipment came to life, chasing her with clearly malicious intentions. Roberto found himself in what appeared to be the old science lab, glass containers filled with impossible creatures watching him hungrily. Carla, on the other hand, fell into an empty auditorium where shadows danced on the stage, reenacting scenes of past school tragedies. The teacher's voice echoed throughout the school. "Let the games begin. Let's see how long you can resist before your minds break. Or worse." Separated and terrified, the five friends now faced their deepest fears, fighting not only for survival, but to maintain their sanity in a school that had become the embodiment of evil. The hunt through the hallways of Padre Anchieta School had begun, and the horror was far from over. After what seemed like hours of unimaginable terror, the five friends, guided by an inexplicable instinct, converged in the old school library. Exhausted, wounded, and on the brink of madness, they gathered in the center of the vast hall, surrounded by bookshelves that seemed to stretch infinitely. Mariana, her face marked with tears and blood, was the first to speak. You were guided here too?" The others nodded, their eyes revealing the trauma of the individual trials they had faced. "There has to be a reason," Lucas muttered, his eyes frantically scanning the shelves. Something in this library, some secret. As if responding to his observation, a heavy book fell from a nearby shelf, opening upon hitting the floor. The pages turned on their own, stopping at a grotesque illustration of an ancient ritual. Bia, trembling, approached to read. The Rite of Dissolution, a ritual to undo demonic pacts and close interdimensional portals. Roberto, still panting, exclaimed, "That's it. That's how we can end this madness." But before they could delve deeper, the teacher's voice echoed through the library, making the books tremble on the shelves. "Ah, the rats found the cheese. But do they have the courage to bite?" The entity materialized before them, now a pulsating mass of darkness with thousands of eyes and mouths. "Do you really think you can undo what was sealed with blood so many decades ago?" Carla, her sixth sense on high alert, screamed, "Don't listen to him. He's afraid." The library began to twist, the walls bending impossibly. Books flew off the shelves, their pages turning into sharp blades, cutting through the air. "Hurry!" Mariana shouted. "We need to perform the ritual." The five formed a circle around the book, their hands joining. But as Bia began to recite the ancient words, unimaginable horrors emerged from the shadows. Ghosts of the students sacrificed 50 years ago appeared, their mutilated bodies a nightmare vision. "Why do you deserve to live when we died?" they lamented in unison. The teacher laughed, his form expanding to fill the library. "See the truth. You are no different from your predecessors. Your souls are already stained by the evil of this school." Images of the horrors each had faced during the night appeared around them, the fears they had overcome, the temptations they had almost succumbed to, the dark secrets that had been revealed. Lucas, fighting despair, shouted, "No! We are stronger than this. Keep the ritual going." Bia's voice trembled, but she continued to recite. The air around them began to vibrate with arcane energy. The teacher roared in fury, tentacles of darkness whipping toward them. "You don't understand," the entity bellowed. "This school, this evil, it's part of you now. It always has been." Suddenly, the five saw dark versions of themselves emerging from the walls, distorted reflections representing their worst fears and darkest desires. Mariana, tears streaming down her face, screamed, "It's a lie! We can choose who we want to be." With supreme effort, the five resisted the horrifying visions, their voices joining Bia's in the recitation of the ritual. The entire library began to shake. Cracks appeared in the floor, revealing a pulsating abyss of darkness below. The teacher writhed in agony, his form disintegrating. "No!" the entity roared. "You don't know what you're doing. Evil cannot be destroyed, only contained." But it was too late. With a blinding flash of light and a deafening crash, the ritual reached its climax. The darkness that had engulfed the school for decades began to be sucked back into the abyss. The five friends, exhausted and stunned, found themselves back in the classroom where it all began. The light of dawn began to filter through the windows, dispelling the last shadows of the night of horror. But as they exchanged looks of relief and disbelief, a dark doubt hung in the air. Had the evil truly been defeated, or merely contained? And at what cost? Padre Anchieta School fell silent, its secrets once again dormant. For now. The rising sun bathed the facade of Padre Anchieta School in a golden light, almost ironic after the night of indescribable terror. The five friends, exhausted and traumatized, staggered out of the building, their minds still struggling to process the events of the past hours. Mariana was the first to break the silence, her voice hoarse from screaming, "Is it over? Is it really over?" Lucas, his face pale and eyes sunken, replied softly, "I don't know if something like this ever really ends." They sat on the steps of the entrance, unable to completely leave the site of their torment. The world around them seemed surreally normal. Birds sang. Cars passed by on the street. The town awakened to another ordinary day. Bia, trembling despite the growing warmth of the morning, murmured, How can we go on after this?" Roberto, the once confident athlete, now seemed diminished, his voice breaking. "No one will believe us. They'll think we've gone mad." Carla, her eyes scanning the facade of the school, spoke with surprising calm. "Maybe that's for the best. Some truths are too heavy to share." As they talked, they noticed subtle changes in themselves. Mariana found she could feel others' emotions with alarming intensity. Lucas saw shadows moving at the edge of his vision, even in daylight. Bia heard unintelligible whispers when everything was silent. Roberto felt his physical strength fluctuating inexplicably. And Carla now saw auras around people, colors revealing hidden intentions. "We're different," Mariana observed, silent tears streaming down her face. Lucas nodded somberly. The school marked us forever. At that moment, the first school bus turned the corner, bringing students for another day of classes. The five friends looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. "We can't let them in," Roberto said, standing with renewed determination. "But what can we do?" Bia asked, fear evident in her voice. Carla, her eyes glowing with newfound wisdom, replied, "Protect them. Watch. Make sure what happened to us never happens again." Mariana agreed. "We're the guardians now. It's our responsibility." As the first students approached, the five friends positioned themselves at the entrance of the school. Their faces, though marked by the terror of the past night, now showed a steely determination. Lucas, his voice firm for the first time since the nightmare began, declared, "Padre Anchieta School may have changed us, but it didn't break us, and as long as we're here, no evil will pass through these doors again." The five exchanged looks of mutual understanding. The night of horror had ended, but their journey was just beginning. Carrying the weight of a terrible secret and inexplicable gifts, they had become the unlikely guardians of a school hiding secrets beyond human comprehension. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows over the hallways of Padre Anchieta School, one question lingered silently in the air. Had the evil truly been defeated? Or had it merely fallen asleep, waiting patiently for the moment to awaken again? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. Mariana, Lucas, Bia, Roberto, and Carla would never be the same. The last lesson at the cursed school had ended, but the lessons learned would echo for eternity. 5 years had passed since that fateful night at Padre Anchieta School. The building's facade, recently renovated, gleamed under the setting sun. To unwitting passers-by, it was just another ordinary school. But to 5 young adults gathered in the park across the street, it was a monument to unimaginable horrors and a constant reminder of their sacred duty. Mariana, now a school counselor at Padre Anchieta, watched the last students leave. Her supernatural empathy had become both a blessing and a curse in her work. "Any signs?" Lucas asked, approaching. His ever-alert eyes scanned the shadows among the park's trees. After years of studying the occult, he had become the group's unofficial researcher. Mariana shook her head. "Nothing yet. But you know how it is. The calm always comes before the storm." Bia joined them, her fingers nervously tapping on an amulet hanging around her neck. The whispers she heard had become clearer over time, sometimes bringing warnings, other times threats. "I've been having dreams again," she murmured. "Something is stirring." Roberto, who had spent the past years training in martial arts to channel his unstable strength, frowned. "Should we do another sweep tonight?" "I agree," said Carla, the last to join the group. Her eyes, capable of seeing beyond the veil of reality, scanned the school. "The auras are restless." The five exchanged worried glances. Despite their lives taking different paths, they remained united by a bond forged in terror and shared responsibility. Sometimes Lucas spoke softly. "I wonder if we really won that night, or if we just delayed the inevitable." Mariana placed a hand on his shoulder. "We win every day. We keep the students safe. Every night we prevent the evil from awakening." A cold wind blew through the park, making the tree leaves whisper as if sharing dark secrets. For a moment they all swore they heard a distant, familiar laugh, echoing in the depths of their minds. "Stay alert," Carla warned, her eyes fixed on a point beyond normal sight. "I feel we're on the brink of something big." As the sun set, casting long shadows over Padre Anchieta School, the five guardians prepared for another night of vigilance. The evil they had faced years ago might be dormant, but never truly defeated. And as the school lights went out and darkness settled in, a solitary figure watched from the highest window. For a moment its eyes glowed with a supernatural light, and a sinister smile formed on its lips. The last lesson might have ended, but the true lesson was just beginning. The night of terror at Padre Anchieta Municipal School is just a thread in the dark web that permeates our world. In every town, behind respectable facades, places and stories hold ancient secrets capable of challenging reality itself. The horror faced by the five friends may have been contained, but its echoes reverberate through the fabric of our universe, waiting to be heard by those willing to listen. Stay tuned for the next tale from Draven Nocturnus, where new familiar curses, demonic pacts, and unimaginable horrors await those brave or foolish enough to unravel them. Remember, sometimes true terror is not locked in a forbidden basement, but hidden within ourselves. Until the next night of nightmares, when the shadows lengthen again, and the whispers from beyond find new ears to torment.